All right. Well, welcome everyone to our spring semester virtual leadership workshop. This is the second or third year that the fraternity has conducted this. Can we just have everyone make sure you are muted, please? This is something that the Phi Epsilon Kappa Fraternity Board of Directors has organized under the leadership of our current president, Dr. Ann Hickey. My name's Dr. David Lorenzi, and I am the executive director of Phi Epsilon Kappa. I'm going to speak a little bit at the end, time permitting, and just provide a couple of quick updates of some going-ons with the organization for the spring semester, but I don't want to take any more time. So I'm going to pass it to Dr. Hickey to introduce our speaker this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Hello, everybody. As you said, I am Dr. Ann Hickey. I'm the current president for Phi Epsilon Kappa. I'm also the chapter advisor for the Zeta Lambda chapter at Whittier College and a professor in the kinesiology department at Whittier College. I hope everyone's semester is going well, and I'm really excited about our workshop tonight. As members of PEK, we look to you as leaders and emerging leaders, future leaders. And so as a national organization, we really want to offer more of these professional development workshops so we can help develop these tools that you can take with you as you kind of progress through school, through your careers, and through life. So I'm really honored and excited to introduce our guest speaker for our event tonight. His name is Barton. He is a former Major League Baseball player. He is a motivational speaker, a published author, entrepreneur, philanthropist. And I asked him to come speak to us today about leadership and effective leadership skills because of his many accomplishments and interests. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and hand this over to Barton. You're still muted.
Oops, had a little bit of personal technical difficulties, but I would like to say thank you to you, Dr. Hickey, and thank you, Dr. Lorenzi, for allowing me an opportunity to come speak to you all. I would like to apologize just off the bat. I had some computer problems earlier, so my computer crashed on me and it was not allowing me to be able to provide any sort of graphics or anything. So I'm coming off of my phone right now, but I don't believe that it would change the message, and hopefully you all will enjoy what I have to say today. And I look forward to the question and answers at the end of the day. But first and foremost, I would just like to say good afternoon and good evening to each and every one of you in attendance. I would like to welcome you into my home, into my office. But I also would just like to thank you for welcoming me into your organization. I hope that many of you enjoyed your holidays over these past couple of days. And I know that for some, we had the Super Bowl, which is a holiday for a lot of us. And for others, we have Valentine's Day. And depending upon how you look at it, maybe Sunday probably was a Valentine's Day for you as well. But unlike me, I didn't have anyone to spend my Valentine's Day with. So I was at home eating ice cream and watching Notebook. And just to let you all know, The Notebook is a great movie. So don't feel sorry for me. I had a great time. Once again, I would like to thank you, Professor Hickey, for giving me an opportunity to come speak to you and having the opportunity to browse the website and learn a little bit about the organization. I learned that I would be speaking to many of former professionals and current professionals and future professionals in the kinesiology related fields. And it is fitting because as a former athlete myself, I had the opportunity to work with many of you in the field of related professional fields that you are in. And sometimes I did not want to have to work with you guys, but barring injuries and those things, I was privileged to have to work with you. But first, I wanted to just start off by giving an introduction of who I am. I grew up in the heart of Los Angeles, and I wanted three things.
You're muted again.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There you go, Brian.
Okay, what was the last thing that you guys heard that I said?
Born in Los Angeles, and then I think you cut out at that point.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I was born in the heart of Los Angeles, and like I said, there was three things that I wanted to do growing up. I wanted to be an astronaut, I wanted to play Major League Baseball, and I wanted to travel the world. And obviously, sitting right here, one of the things that I wasn't able to do was become that astronaut, but it didn't stop me from wanting to stay in a related field. So I decided to attend school and pursue a degree in aerospace engineering. Now, I attended Loyola Marymount University, and I subsequently transferred and went to the University of Miami, the U, where I also played baseball. After attending the university and doing 3 years of baseball, I decided to forego my degree, and I left school early so that I can pursue my dream of becoming a Major League Baseball player. And it took me about 3 years to get to the big leagues, but my time there in the big league only lasted about a year and a day with the St. Louis Cardinals and the Atlanta Braves. The other 5 years was spent kind of journeying around different parts of the world, playing in Venezuela, playing in Mexico, playing in small little towns throughout the United States until I finally decided that I wanted to give it up. But however, while I was playing, I was able to embark on a passion of speaking that I had picked up in high school. And I took that skill and I applied it to speaking around respective cities that I played ball in, because I really wanted to impact people and impact the youth lives. And I really, really, really thought that that would be something that I would be good at. So I followed that up by writing 2 books. I'm gonna give myself a shameless plug: Stats and Situations and Mindset, if you can see. And I also started forming my own company, which focuses on motivational speaking, consulting, and things of the like. So throughout my career and throughout my life in sports, I've experienced many situations, as well as been placed in many roles of leadership. But many times I didn't really understand what it meant to be a leader. I thought that it was just about a position I was given to you. However, it wasn't until I went skydiving that I really began to understand what leadership and being a leader really meant. Now, I will be honest, height is not one of my strongest suits, but in that moment, I decided that I was not going to let it hold me back, but instead, I was going to let it propel me forward. I tried to psych myself out and play it real cool on the days leading up, but I think that worked to my disadvantage, because even at the facility, I tried to be so relaxed. I tried to be joking. I tried to be jovial and everything, to the point where I ended up being the last person on the airplane. And on that particular plane, the last person on the plane ended up being the first person out. Now, for me, that meant that I had to sit at the door. And I remember when they opened that door, here I am looking out, not strapped in, and I'm 5, 6, 7,000 feet above the ground. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I just get myself into? And that's when I remember that the butterflies started setting in, and I realized that I don't know if I was ready for this. But anyways, when it was time to go up, I had a totally different demeanor. I almost wanted to tap out, and I remember when my tandem partner decided to strap me in, he had me waddle to the door, and to my surprise, I began to get calm. My nerves, they went out the door, and I remember looking over the horizon, and I felt a sense of peace that overcame me. And then we jumped. We jumped, had a great time, and then we landed. But over the next few days, I kept trying to interpret this feeling of peace that I felt, and then it hit me. The words "height is revealing," it popped into my head. Think about that. Height is revealing. And it made so much sense in that moment. I thought to myself, and I began to think that the higher you are, the more that is revealed to you, the more you see. I saw a world I could conquer, places I could travel. Nothing obscured my vision, and I could see it all. I saw the possibilities. I even saw the responsibilities, and I realized that I was ready for it all. And see, when you are a leader, you are expected to express that vision, share the possibilities, and shoulder the responsibilities. But watch this. When we are at ground level, we don't have to worry about all that there, especially in our minds. Why? Because when we're at ground level, there are so many things blocking our view. We have buildings, we have trees that are blocking our vision. We have noises that are distracting us, and the steadiness of the ground, it actually makes us feel sort of comfortable. So then I just began to start asking myself in that moment, am I a leader? And if I see myself as a leader, then what is a leader? Obviously, a leader is someone who leads, right? But who and what determines a leader? How are they even picked? And I began to think about all the ways that leaders could be chosen, and some of them became comical because I began to think about it the same way as we would pick teams. And I came up with a quick list of some of the ways that we may even pick our leaders, and feel free to share many of your own in the chat if you have it. But some of the things I came up with was that we may pick leaders just because they're popular. Other reasons we may pick leaders is because they're tall. Sometimes we use age as a gauge of picking leaders. Sometimes leaders are picked because of their race. We even pick leaders because of their gender. We pick leaders because of their status, skill set and experience, likability. Sometimes leaders are even picked by force, familiarity, good looks. And sometimes we pick our leaders by default just because there's no one else to take up the realms. But depending on the group and situation, any of these could apply. And when it came to me, especially when I was younger, I began to wonder, like, why me? What makes me so special? Why did people look up to me? And in that moment, I realized that I was dealing with a bit of imposter syndrome because I felt like I definitely wasn't the person for the job. I couldn't lead people. But let someone tell me that I couldn't do something that pertained to my personal life and my personal goals, and boy, that beast came out of me. You couldn't tell me nothing. But when it came to leading people, that wasn't me. I was good at talking up myself when it came to myself, but not with others. But later in life, I understood that my first real introduction to being a leader was with me. When we think about leaders, think about people who have followers. Think about it. Well, who is your first follower? You. You are your first follower. growing up, I never was the biggest. I never was the strongest. I never was the fastest. But I will tell you one thing that I had. I had heart and the will to get better at everything that I did. I always worked on getting better, but I also always had people that told me that it was just a waste of time and that I just wasn't good enough. And I remember the first time someone told me that less than 1% of the people who play baseball make it to the major leagues. And I remember that one thing that I told them that I will be 100% of that 1%. Then I told myself the same thing over and over, and I continued to tell myself that until I bought in. And years later, I fulfilled my dream. That's when I realized about leadership that the first person that you have to lead is yourself. You have to tell yourself and get yourself to buy in. Now, there may be many definitions that we might hear about in regards to leadership, but I define leadership as the ability to get people to buy in. And then I also learned that leadership is not just about the position, but it is about people. And it reminds me of a book that I just finished reading called The Carpenter by John Gordon. I'm not sure if you can read it, and I'm not sure if you're familiar. He spoke at a conference that I went to a few weeks ago, and he introduced us with a few concepts. But the book itself starts out by us learning about a man named Michael who owns a tech company. And during a morning run, he collapses, and upon waking up at the hospital, he learned that his collapse was a product of stress, and that he would have to take time away from his business, which was something that pretty much he did not want to do. But he also finds out that the person who saved his life was a carpenter that left his business card with the number but no name, which he thought obviously was a horrible marketing strategy. But when he was released from the hospital and able to return home, he decided to call the carpenter so that he can thank him for saving his life. Now, when he called the carpenter, he received a voicemail message essentially saying that, hey, I'm spending my time giving my all to a project for someone that actually hired me to do a job for them. And I'm quite sure that if I was working on your project, I would be giving it the same amount of attention. So if you wanted to meet with me, essentially, you would have to meet me at the cafe at noon that I always meet at. Now, he actually thought that was kind of weird, because what type of marketing strategy was that for a person who was looking for business? But he decided that he was going to meet this guy anyway so that he could thank him once again for saving his life. But when he arrived at the cafe, he realized that a lot of people knew this man and that he was very grateful for the person who saved his life. But he wondered why this man was so popular, especially since he didn't have a great marketing strategy. He didn't leave his name on his business card, and so many people gravitated to him. Now, Michael, he was a very hands-on, micromanaging boss that couldn't stand to be away from work. And his focus was just on building the business, and the components of the business that he was working on building was lacking because of the many flaws that he had in his leadership. And he realized that they were exposed. And as a thank you to the carpenter for saving his life, Michael decided that he would take this time to have the marketer build him an entertainment center for his wife. But what he failed to realize was that the process of building this entertainment system would be more than just the entertainment system. It would be a time for him to learn some very, very important life lessons that would help him grow his business into a successful business. And one of the things that he learned was that the success of his business started with people. He learned to lead with love. Eventually, he learned to serve, and he learned to care. Now, unknowingly, I believe that's how I try to personally approach leadership. I really wanted to be there for people. And when you put people over the position, then every moment becomes a leadership moment. And I want to make this point because even when you're not in a leadership position, you will continue to be put in positions where leadership is required. Because leadership is exhibited in moments and situations, not just positions. Now, there was a moment where I had my own people moment with a teammate that didn't necessarily depend on a position. My teammate was going through a slump and was beating himself up. And I remember talking to him and was trying to lift him up. And to my surprise, I remember him telling me that, yeah, I know it's easy for you to say this and to be so uplifting because you're doing well. Now, for me, I felt like that was a slap in the face, and I could have easily and should have easily let him be, but I wanted him to succeed and feel confident in himself. But not only would I do extra batting practice and work with him in the gym, but I would also talk to him about his mental approach and the process and appreciating the small wins. And in the beginning, he was a little bit skeptical because when you're struggling, all you want to do is see quick results. But day by day, he began to buy in. And because I was able to get him to see that through quick results, that though the quick results may feel good in moments, sustainability and long-term success may take some actual time. Now, eventually he began to realize that the main culprit of his slump was in his head. And knowing that I wasn't necessarily worried about his results or abilities because I was there myself, instead, I wanted him to learn and to understand that there are other components in his life, in his game, that he could point to for success. And I believe this is something that many of you do well in understanding the importance of your respective fields, especially as trainers, because when I was going through my knee surgery, when I felt like things was getting too hard and I had my trainers and just a little thing that's bending my knee, just a centimeter, they saw that as accomplishments. They saw that as a step forward. And I thought that that was something that was very helpful in my progress, because over time, I realized to take those small steps and turn them into steps that actually will help me get to the goal of getting back on the field later in life. See, in those moments, I was able to take away the unnecessary burden off of his shoulders by allowing him to see the importance of taking those small wins and seeing and appreciate the importance of them. Now, in that moment, I wasn't necessarily a team captain or anything like that. I was just a teammate. But in that moment, I saw that there was an opportunity to lead, because his success and understanding that him being successful also helped our team. So when I really began to look into leaders and studying leadership and different types of leaders and styles, I began to form a diagram as to what I call the leadership circle and some basic components that describes the leader. It gives me a structure to look at when I am evaluating a leader. Now, I told you that before I was having some technical difficulties, and I'm not necessarily sure if you can see. Probably can't because I have the light on. Let me see if I can try by turning this light off. Probably not. Well, anyway, The circle consists of different components of which I use to describe a leader. And in that first circle, it starts out itself with the leader itself. Now, the title could come from somebody being actually appointed or just being in that position situationally. However, I use that as an opportunity, as a perfect time to identify and to learn about the leader. In these moments, we may try to look into what makes this person qualified. What is it that this person does, his experience, his credentials? We may even ask ourselves these questions if we find ourselves in the same position, and if we have it in ourselves what it takes to lead. Now, the second component of that circle, which is the second circle, describes a leader by its followers. Leaders are identified and judged by the followers it has. Without followers, there is nothing to lead. A shepherd is not a shepherd if it has no sheep to lead. A team captain can't lead without a team. Even taking it back to elementary, if there is no line, I can't be a line leader. Now, whether everyone has bought into you and your vision, that's something totally different. But we understand that there will be some people who will flock to you while other people will be placed into that position, and you will have to get them on board, which leads them to the next circle. A lot of leaders, whether from followers and non-followers, I believe are judged by three things: their words, their actions, and their beliefs. Now, it's important for us to be mindful that what you say, and to be sure that what you say is what you meant to say, and that what you mean to say is communicated clearly. Because an unclear message, a misinformed message, and an insincere message can make it very difficult for you to lead. And it's just as important to be mindful of the things you do, because in many cases, our actions are tethered to the things we say in the eyes of those we are leading. Now, our beliefs are also very important to people who lead, because it touches on the very fabric of who we are as people. It's the foundation of our ideas, it determines our character, and it is where our vision comes from. And with these three components, we establish credibility, which is the next circle. Credibility is what we hope to achieve when we are leading, because this is what gives people the confidence in continuing to follow us and following our lead. Because once you establish credibility, you get the buy-in. We talked about that earlier. Leadership is the ability to get people to buy in. Once you establish credibility, you get buy-in. And that is the last circle, which I call commitment. A leader is most effective when he or she has commitment. So the first part of that circle is the leader himself. Then you have your followers. You have what the leader is judged by: the things he say, the things he do, and the things that he believe, he or she. And from there, you establish credibility and you get the commitment. Now, metaphorically, when I think about leadership, I think about it as an actual ship. You know, that big metal monstrosity that's in the sea, and it's baffling to understand, like, how does thing even stay afloat? Well, I understand that there are many factors that allow ships to float, like the fact that ships are hollow and filled with air, as well as the shape of the ship. All these things play a part into what allows a ship to float. But when we talk about a ship floating, we are also introduced to this thing in physics called buoyancy. Now, buoyancy in simple terms is the ability of something to float in water. And in more technical terms, it is the upward force that the fluid exerts on an object. Now, a ship itself doesn't sink because its weight is less than the volume that of the water that it actually pushes aside. Now, the air inside the ship, which is much less than the water, is one of the things that help keep the ship afloat. And so all these different components is what allow the ship to float. But now we also know that the big cargo ships are loaded very strategically to ensure that it has proper weight, distribution, and balance such that the ship doesn't tilt or lean. So when we talk about the leadership, remember what I mentioned earlier. Leadership is not about the position, it is about the people. And the only way the ship does not sink is if everyone is on board, no pun intended. Your followers, your staff, your team, their job is to make sure that the ship floats. And your job as a leader is to make sure that it doesn't sink. It is to steer it away from danger, to make sure it's not overloaded, and possibly to oversee everything is operating very properly. But one of the most important things that the leader must remember is that he or she is a part of a team. And a good leader would know when it's time to tap into another person, leader moment, or situation. A good leader would know that. They would learn when to listen and to take advice. And a good leader will know that at times he will have to follow. Good leaders understand that. Because the myth about leaders is that they have all the answers, which is false. They do not have weaknesses, which is also false. Another myth about leaders is that even in some cases, they don't experience doubt, which is also false. That is why having a team is so important. That is also the reason why effective leaders have mentors themselves and they seek therapy, because they are also human. I had a coach who wasn't even afraid to ask his players for insight because he saw things from a different perspective, because we actually saw things from a different perspective while on the field, and he thought that it was important that he get that information from us and that it would help him become a better coach. Now, I want you to realize that on your journey for leadership, you will be faced with many challenges and you will learn many things. You will have different ideas of what leadership means to you, and you will exercise these ideas in many different ways. But what I want you to remember is this: leadership begins with your first follower, and that's you. I also want you to remember that even without a title, there is an opportunity for leadership in every moment or situation. And lastly, leadership is not about the position, but it is about the people. I would like to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to come speak to you. I look forward to answering any questions that many of you, or hopefully any of you, may have. And thank you once again for allowing me this opportunity.
Thank you, Brian. So I do want to get started with our question and answer period. And I do see a question in the chat. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with that one. So our first question is, how did you like playing for the Cardinals? Go Cardinals, I'm from St. Louis, and the Braves. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I got it now. I'm sorry. The Cardinals. I would say that I absolutely loved playing for the Cardinals. Now, I'm quite sure Dr. Hickey could attest to that, but as a player, I don't think I could have had a better opening day. I could have had a better first year experience. St. Louis was a great city. Now, honestly, when I first got there, I didn't necessarily think that I would like it, but the city itself actually grew on me. It was my first time there. The fans were great. They know their baseball and they love their baseball. And the city was just awesome. It was a great experience. Opening day was a great experience. I took it all in. I video recorded everything. The crowd was hyped and it was just a great experience. Now, with the Atlanta Braves, I would say the one game that I actually did play with them, I loved it. However, it was a short stint, but the organization that I was in with the Braves, it was great. Had some great teammates. Once again, played with some great players, and just my whole baseball career, it was a great experience, a learning experience, and it was something that I hold dear to.
Thank you. Let's see. Another question from the chat. As a leader surrounded by other leaders, what is a good way to help them overcome doubts, imposter syndrome?
Okay, can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, of course. So as a leader surrounded by other leaders, what is a good way to help them overcome doubts or imposter syndrome?
Well, I know we all probably to some certain extent have situations in which we kind of have doubt within ourselves and we do feel like we may not belong. And I understand the responsibilities of being a leader and what those things can reveal about ourselves. And I really believe that tapping into people who actually believe in you, right? Sometimes we need a village around us as well to remind us who we are and how qualified and how good we are in some of the things that we do. I think being around people that allow for you or give you positive reinforcements is key, because we have to continue to remember that we are human, and that when we think about leaders, the reason why I think a lot of us face that sense of doubt or that imposter syndrome is because we feel like we're on an island by ourselves and we feel like all the responsibilities fall on our shoulders. But once you realize that being a leader is really about a team and that everything doesn't necessarily depend on you, I believe that it will kind of instill a little more confidence, because now the confidence is not just based on you as a person, but it's based on the team that you actually, are putting together. So I would definitely say about imposter syndrome is that you put yourself around people. And, there was one thing that I did have someone tell me. Actually, I have a therapist that I actually talked to, and one of the things that we actually talked about was the things that we tell ourselves. And I think it was also in a book that I read as well, but it said to stop thinking and instead start talking to yourself. Because when you think, you have a tendency of thinking about things that you cannot control. But when you talk to yourself, you actually have control over the things that you tell yourself. And when I started practicing that, I started reinforcing myself with positive ideas and positive thoughts and telling myself things that reinforce me, that allow me to kind of remove some of that doubt that I would actually have in face.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, what is the best piece of advice that you could give to someone that is looking to coach baseball in the future?
The best piece of advice that I can give someone who is looking to coach baseball in the future. Now, I did have an opportunity to coach baseball in France for Team France. We had an opportunity to make it to the Olympics, and that was something that definitely was a great experience. And I understand that coaching itself is a very taxing job. I mean, there's a lot of strategizing, there's a lot of meetings that you have to do and put together. But one of the things that I would say is, maybe one of the good ways is start out by maybe coaching a little league team, right? Like building up experience in different areas and different levels, volunteering, and tapping into your network base of maybe someone may know somebody who may be coaching, whether it's at a professional level, whether it's at the college level, but have to find some sort of way to build your experience up, not necessarily for the fact of just having experience, but just so you could get yourself comfortable with not only teaching people, but with leading an organized team. Because the one thing that people look for when we talk about coaches, especially at the professional level, is the type of organizational skills you have in terms of leading the team. What type of coach are you? Are you a people's person? Are you a player's coach? Are you a coach who has a heart to teach, and all those different things? And I think that you get that from experiencing the different levels of coaching, especially starting from little league through high school, through college, and going from that road. Now, if you're an actual player itself and have some professional experience, it makes that professional coaching experience a little bit easier because there's a different network of people that you can actually tap into. But from that standpoint, I would say just, start at any level that you can get into, and hopefully, build relationships and networking, because once again, not just leadership, but a lot of things that we do in life is about people. And when you build these relationships with people, they can help you get to the places that you need to be in life.
Thank you. Our next question is, you mentioned what others may see as a leader or what they think should be a leader. When you were younger in life and in your career, what did you see as a leader? And did you see a certain leader that you would never copy?
Well, I know earlier in my presentation, I talked about kind of how leaders are picked, right? And I think when you don't have a true concept of what leader is, you sort of accept anything as your leader or anyone as your leader. And for me, when I was younger, a leader was automatically somebody that was older than me. And it didn't necessarily mean that they knew what they were doing, they knew what they were talking about, but it was more so a respect thing because they were my elders. Then you start, realizing that a lot of people are placed as leader by the things that they do necessarily, especially in baseball or in sports in general. A lot of people are tagged with this idea of leaders just because they have good numbers, they put up good stats. And I would laugh sometimes when I would hear announcers talk about how great of a leader a person is or whatnot, just because they're a great ball player. But me being a person that's actually in the locker room with some of these guys, they don't see the same story that we see. But I say that to say that leadership, it comes in many different forms, and many of us have really different ideas of what a leader is to us. And for me, I had to learn over time that a great leader is someone who first put people first, and someone who's able to communicate, their vision and have direction, which many of us probably would agree upon. Now, necessarily, are there leaders that I wouldn't want to be like? Oh yeah, there are plenty of people. There are plenty of examples. Some I may not necessarily want to put out there, but there are examples of people that I definitely would not look to as in regard to leadership, especially when I think about things that they do or say. Definitely people who aren't people, a people person, people who think that leadership is just about them, people who use leadership positions in a dictator type situation. I mean, we all know those type of people who move to a certain position, then all of a sudden they think they can just tell you what to do, and that just because they're your supervisor, you're supposed to do what they say. And those type of people, I definitely don't want to mimic my leadership skills after. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot.
Thank you. That was the last question in the chat. Are there any other questions from the Zoom space? Or anyone want to put another question in the chat? I'll add one more if anyone else is speaking of other questions. As we think of leaders, a lot of times we have to make tough decisions. Not everyone will agree with those decisions, but sometimes decisions are made. So what do you think, kind of from a effective leadership position, how do we make tough decisions, and how are we okay with making those tough decisions?
Well, I think that is one thing that many leaders are kind of judged on, or more so their legacy, I would say, when it comes to the success of their leadership. However, when it comes to making tough decisions, once again, I mentioned before that being a leader is not necessarily means that you're on an island by yourself and you're just making decisions. A good leader and an effective leader will learn how to use not only his followers, and I say followers in the sense of not necessarily that, we're just hopelessly, following a person, but, people that are under him, maybe his staff and things like that, or maybe say like a team member or a coach or whatnot. And when they make these decisions, a lot of times they have to look for feedback from other people. When as a coach, our head coach, when I was coaching in France, he would go around and ask the different coaches, what did they see? Or how certain people are looking, or we have our different scouting objectives that we would have to present. And all that information now gives him something to be able to make a decision on. Now, ultimately, the buck ends with him and stops with him or her. But I think that an effective leader actually doesn't see leadership as all about him and making a decision. Ultimately, he'll be able to take, or she will be able to take all the information that's gathered, and if it aligns with the vision of the organization, the company, or the team, I think it will make that decision-making process a little bit easier.
Thank you. We've got one more question in the chat. When did you know you were going to play baseball? From T-ball and on, and were there other sports that were a passion for you?
Well, I started out playing basketball, actually, and I grew up in Los Angeles as a big Laker fan. I grew up during the times of Magic Johnson, Kareem, Byron Scott, and all those guys. And so from the jump, I actually knew that I was going to be a basketball player. I just had it in my mind. I was good for my age, but I also played every other sport too. We played basketball, we played football in the neighborhoods. Like our whole block was like a sports complex. Any sport that you can name, we played. But I remember one time we were driving in Inglewood, California. Right next to the farm, there was a little field, baseball field, and it had like a little cartoon character of a baseball player. And being a kid, I remember that I saw that cartoon character, and I remember telling my dad, like, I want to play baseball. And it wasn't because I necessarily wanted to play baseball, it's because I just liked that cartoon. And I remember him telling me, and it was kind of unfortunate, but he said, well, if you play baseball, you can't play basketball. And that was the first time I had to make a major decision in my life, because I really enjoyed basketball, but I really wanted to try out baseball because it was money. It was a money situation. Finances was tight and I had to choose. So I chose to play baseball. And once I hopped on that field, it was all she wrote. I fell in love with it. And from that moment, that very moment, I knew I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. And like I mentioned before, I knew I was going to be 100% of that 1%. And that was something that I never wavered on. And I made sure I put in the work until I got to St. Louis.
All right, great, thank you. So that is the last question I see in the chat. And we are close to coming up on the end of our time. So before I hand this back over to Dr. Lorenzi, I just wanted to thank our presenter, Brian Barton, for taking time out of your schedule to spend tonight with us and talk to us about leadership. I think you've given us some great tools, great information, and really appreciate you coming and speaking to us.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Brian, I echo what Dr. Hickey said on behalf of the Phi Epsilon Kappa Fraternity. I appreciate you sharing your story with us this evening and your life lessons as they apply to leadership. And on the call, we have a mix of future professionals. That's what we call our undergraduate and graduate students in our organization. And we also have some chapter advisors who are higher education faculty members as well. So some of these students, I assume, are in leadership positions at their university and their chapters, and obviously the chapter advisors are as well. So good information. Thank you once again. Before we run out of time, while I have a little bit of a captive audience of some of our members, I thought I would just make a couple of quick announcements and share some information with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The first thing that I want to share that I'm kind of excited about, please be on the lookout for an email, and there'll be some social media posts. We're going to have an apparel sale this semester. I get a lot of questions every semester where people can get Phi Epsilon Kappa apparel. When I go to conferences and wear my shirt, people will ask me. So this is the items that we'll be selling, a variety of polos, sweatshirts, t-shirts, quarter zips, different price points, a mug, and a little notebook as well. So that information will go out. We'll have the sale live for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll close it so people can get their items. So be on the lookout for that. And then the last announcement that I wanted to make, since we have some chapter advisors and student leaders on the call this evening, just a reminder, I know spring is my busy time. A lot of chapters initiate new students in the spring. Just a reminder, when you're ready to do that, this is the form that you will send to me. I title it the PEK New Member Report. As you see, it's an Excel spreadsheet. And then I also want you to take note, the board of directors voted last year to increase prices on some of our categories and items in effect this academic year, just due to increased costs on our end for some of these items. So the fees are listed there as well. And a new item that we have this year, we are selling honor cords in addition to the fraternity pin. Those are optional items. You're not required to purchase, but if you are interested, even if you're already a member and want honor cords, you can go through your chapter advisor or feel free to reach out to me directly. The email on the fraternity website, the PEK admin at phiepsilonkappa.org is me. I'm the admin, so that'll come to me if you want to communicate with me as well. So I wanted to share that. And as always, if you have any questions or any issues, we're super excited. We just reactivated the chapter at Grambling State University, University of Central Arkansas. We have UNC Chapel Hill installing a new chapter this semester, and University of Delaware. So I think the new website is helping to get information out. We're trying to have more of a presence on social media. Please feel free if you ever want to post on the social media sites. We have Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. This presentation will go, as I said, to our YouTube channel. You can post directly. You can send me if you have photos, if your chapter's doing any community service activities, or you take pictures at your initiation ceremony. We'd be glad to send those out and share them with everyone as well. So with that being said, before we exit for this evening, does anyone have any questions for me pertaining to any fraternity business or anything of that nature? All right. Stop my share. Okay. So with that being said, then I will close everything. Thanks again to our presenter this evening, Brian Barton, and thank you to Dr. Ann Hickey, our president, for organizing this event for us this evening. Feel free to send me any suggestions if you have any suggestions for speakers or professional development sessions that you'd like to see in the future. Our board holds a planning meeting every summer where we'll plan our events for the next academic year. Our next event is going to be the virtual awards ceremony that we do annually in April. So our awards committee is going to be reviewing the awards next week, and then we'll be announcing all of the award recipients and planning for that ceremony in April. Okay. All right. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for speaking. See ya.
And thank